we have seen five connections of the orbit. Now we are going to see the rest of the six connections. So the next one which we have is our ethmoid bone connection. Okay, so this is our ethmoid bone. We have already established that the pink bone here is your ethmoid bone, right? So in the ethmoid bone, I'm going to tilt the skull a little bit. Okay, so in the ethmoid bone over here, we are able to find two foramens, right? We are able to find two foramens, one in the anterior part over here and other in the posterior part over here, right? So what is happening here actually is that in the ethmoid bone, okay, in the ethmoid bone we have a sulcus. See the sulcus in the ethmoid bone. Okay, so this sulcus we call it as ethmoid groove. Okay, ethmoid sulcus. This is your anterior ethmoid sulcus. Okay, and similar fashion we have in the posterior side. Over here we have in the posterior side our posterior ethmoid sulcus, this one. Okay, our posterior ethmoid sulcus. Now when this ethmoid bone is connecting with our ethmoid bone, when it is connecting with our frontal bone, this is going to be converted into a foramen. See, there's a similar kind of sulcus in your frontal bone also, and together it is going to form a foramen. Similar way, in the anterior side also, you have the sulcus. You have the sulcus over here, right, ethmoid sulcus, and you have the frontal sulcus over here. Together these both are going to form a foramen. Okay, and this foramen is going to be your anterior ethmoid foramen. Okay, understanding how the two ethmoid foramens are coming and where they are located. They are located on the medial wall of your orbit. Okay, see, this is your orbit. Okay, and here you can see very clearly your anterior ethmoid foramen. Over here anterior ethmoid foramen, and over here posterior ethmoid foramen. Okay, so that has two more connections of your orbit. So anterior ethmoid foramen and posterior ethmoid foramen done. The next thing which you have to know is your foramen zygomaticus, right? We have three foramens in the zygomatic. So that is going to be in the zygomatic bone. We will tilt it a little bit. So this orange color bone is your zygomatic bone, right? So in the zygomatic bone, in the part which is facing the anterior side, okay, in your face part, we have a foramen over here. Now that is going to be your facial foramen, okay, or foramen zygomaticus facialis. Understanding where the facial foramen is? Now I'm going to zoom. This over here is your facial foramen. Okay, now I'm going to turn into the internal surface. Okay, I'm going to turn into the internal surface, and on the lateral wall of the orbit we have a foramen on the zygomatic bone over here. Okay, that is going to be your orbital foramen. What orbital foramen? Your zygomaticus orbital foramen. Okay, or foramen zygomaticus orbitalis. Okay, understanding where orbital foramen is present? Now we are going to turn the bone again to the posterior view. Okay, we have come to the posterior lateral view, and in the posterior lateral view, again in our zygomatic bone, we have a foramen that is opening into your temporal fossa. Okay, this area is your temporal fossa. Okay, so it is opening into your temporal fossa. Over here a foramen is present. That foramen is your temporal foramen. Okay, zygomatic temporal foramen or foramen zygomaticus temporalis. Understanding the three zygomatic foramens, the first one is the facial foramen, which is over here, this one. Okay, the second one is the orbital foramen, which is over here in the lateral wall of the orbit, this one. Now the next one is your temporal foramen in the posterior side, opening into your temporal area over here. Okay, so those are the three zygomatic foramens which we have, and we saw two ethmoidal foramens, anterior ethmoidal foramen and posterior ethmoidal foramen also. So that makes it total 5. Only one more is left. The one that is left is going to be your nasolacrimal duct, which is going to connect your orbit to your nasal cavity actually. Now in here actually I already taught you the lacrimal bone, right? I told you that this is the lacrimal bone, right? This longitudinal bone is the lacrimal bone. So in that lacrimal bone you can actually see a cavity at the bottom, right? Can you see this cavity at the bottom? On the other side I'll show you and hopefully it will be marked. Let's see. Yeah, it's marked here only. See, that is your nasolacrimal canal. So where is your nasolacrimal canal starting? It is starting from the inferior wall of your orbit. Okay, see, this is the inferior wall of your orbit. Okay, that is where your nasolacrimal canal is starting, and it is going to go from your orbit, inferior wall. I'll draw and show you the canal, how it's going to go. It's starting from here. It's going to go like this and end over here in your nasal cavity. Okay, it's going to go, this is your skull, so it's going to start from here, it's going to go like this and end here. Okay, again on the other side it's starting from here, it's going to go like this and here and here. Okay, it is starting from the inferior, again write this down, this is how you describe the nasolacrimal duct. It is starting from the inferior wall of orbit, inferior medial wall, okay, inferior medial wall of the orbit, and it is going to the inferior nasal meatus. Okay, this area over here below your inferior nasal concha, that is what we call it as inferior nasal meatus. Okay, you will understand better what is a nasal meatus when we are doing the nasal cavity. For now, for the orbital connections, just understand nasolacrimal duct is starting from the inferior medial wall and it is going through the maxilla bone to your inferior nasal meatus. Okay, clear? So we have finished all the 11 connections of the orbit. Once again, we will just quickly revise whatever is present, all the 11 connections of the orbit. So try to, when I mark it, please try to name it along with me. So the first one, we have the, what is this? Supraorbital foramen. We have the infraorbital foramen. We have optic canal. We have the superior orbital fissure. We have inferior orbital fissure. We have the zygomatic orbital foramen, zygomatic facial foramen, and on the posterior side we have over here zygomatic on the posterior side, right? Zygomatic temporal foramen. We have anterior ethmoidal foramen. We have posterior ethmoidal foramen. We have our nasolacrimal duct over here. Okay, so how many has it been? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All 11 canals done. So these are the connections of your orbit.